distracted by the finer things in life. You look shattered and he's broke, and all you have to do is find that guy who's perfect for you. And the fine line between wrong and right.
The trust we give medical professionals is born out of a belief that they have a duty to care and protect. But trust can be abused.
Someone so bubbly and full of life is gone.
It's not realistic to suggest she took it herself. It's just nonsense. You can't put your finger on it, but you know something's not straightforward.
When a nurse dies suddenly after a night out with colleagues, the only conclusion can be that it was just a tragic accident. Or was there a more sinister explanation? Susan Annis worked as a nurse in Crawley Hospital's A&E department. In 1994, Jo Lashwood had only just qualified as a nurse herself when she first met Susan.
I wish I had more photos, but those 90s, we just didn't take that many pictures like we do today. That's quite sad, really. Sue was then a senior staff nurse, and she was allocated as my mentor, so she immediately took me under her wing. She was a very bubbly person, always smiling, laughing, chatty. Very attractive. She was tall, she was slim, and everyone liked her. You couldn't not like her, really.
Susan's parents, Audrey and David, remember she showed an interest in nursing from a very young age.
That is a lovely picture of Susan.
That's a lovely one.
That's a lovely picture of her.
But Audrey used to help out at an old people's home, and Susan used to go with you.
I did think she'd make a good nurse. With a dancing class. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I used to take her to the ballet, and she decided that she'd be a ballet dancer, but she was going to be a nurse. So she was fighting between the two. She chose nursing.
By 1996, Susan, now 31, had become a sister in the busy emergency department in Crawley Hospital.
Shifts were just notoriously chaotic, but Sue ran the shift and it worked. The roof could be falling in and Sue would still be running around, making sure patients were well looked after.
She really enjoyed life, worked hard, and she played hard.
We were quite similar. We were kind of rock chicks. We liked our Aerosmith, our Def Leppard, Metallica. We liked our dancing, our parties, our cider. We talked about our boyfriends and fond memories.
Dr. John Parsley had got to know Susan when they both started working in the hospital within weeks of each other.
Working nights. I was living in Brighton. I'd pick her up in Hayward's Heath and then go to Crawley and then take her back in the morning on my way home. In the casualty department, because of the type of work, you find there's very strong bonds between all the staff.
During busy shifts, Susan started complaining of heart palpitations.
We would say, look, lay down, let's stick a cardiac monitor on you and see what's going on. It showed that she'd gone into a rhythm called supraventricular tachycardia, which is commonly referred to as SVT, which is a problem with the electrical impulses in the heart, which makes the heart beat extra fast. And it would just spontaneously revert back to normal. It just seemed to last a few minutes or a few seconds at times and then just stop. So she was aware of it and we were aware of it.
When she first had it, she was almost bragging about it. You know, look what I've got, sort of thing. But she settled down and she realised that she had to take things at a pace slower. But that didn't stop her doing anything.
Nobody said to her, you've got to get that urgently dealt with. They just said, well, you've got to get that sorted.
After some years, Jo left Crawley Hospital to work in Liverpool. At this time, Susan was in a happy relationship, and Jo felt she was leaving behind a friend whose life was very much on the up, personally and professionally.
I had a leaving do and Sue came to that and yeah, I just moved on and you just assume you're going to see people again. It just didn't occur that it would ever be the end.
In the autumn of 1996, Susan Annis was on a course at the Royal Brompton in Chelsea as part of her paediatric diploma and to help her fulfil her dream of creating a separate children's area within Crawley Hospital's A&E department.
She hated the lack of facilities for children.
So that it could be separated from, say, the drunks who sometimes came into the A&E department.
She told the hospital that they should do something, and they said, you do it.
So she was sent up on this children's nursing course.
Well, she was very intelligent, she was very academic. It was a new role and it's very important to the A&E department and we all supported her on it.
Susan made friends with a number of other nurses on the course, including 35-year-old Kevin Cobb, who was based at St Peter's Hospital in Chertsey. Dr John Parsley had met him before when he had previously worked there.
Kevin Cobb, he was a nurse in the casualty, perfectly proficient at his job. He didn't stand out from the crowd in any way. He was just straight down the middle. And the only thing Sue said, that he was struggling on the course, and the rest of the class were concerned about that. You know, nicely concerned. No backbiting or anything like that.
From all accounts, Susan Annis was popular, warm, supportive to her friends, and just somebody who seemed to be beloved by the people she was surrounded by.
Susan had a bright and exciting future, but one fateful encounter would bring it all tragically to an end.
Susan Annis was on a course at the Royal Brompton Hospital. She was staying in a nursing home type building in Chelsea. She went for some drinks and a pizza with some colleagues.
After the meal, Susan and new friend Kevin Cobb were having a drink together back at their quarters.
She was drinking cider. Her heart went into irregular beats and she collapsed. Kevin Cobb panicked and tried to administer CPR and called other members of staff and they tried to save her life, but unfortunately she died.
One night, knock on the front door and there was a policeman to tell us that Susan had passed away. We were just told that she'd had some sort of heart attack.
Some friends who worked in Crawley Hospital came down to Brighton, where I was living, and said that she had died. And they didn't have any more information than that.
It was a sudden death and there were obviously going to be lots of questions, but it was just shock of it. At the age of 31, you don't expect someone, especially someone like Sue, to die. It past my mind whether it was something to do with the heart complaint that she'd had. That was the only illness I could think of. Just disbelief, really, that someone that's so bubbly and full of life had it all and then is gone suddenly.
And of course, everybody's upset, but there's this gap in the knowledge of what's really happened.
Susan's sudden death inevitably raised many questions. Was it a tragic accident? Or was it something more suspicious? In February 1997, 3 months after Susan had died, an inquest into her sudden death began.
I went to the inquest at the Westminster Coroner's Court with Sue's family. Her GP would not normally go to an inquest. He went as well. There's something where you can't put your finger on it, but you know something's not straightforward. Because why would all these people be going?
The post-mortem included a toxicology report that found Susan had traces of the anaesthetic drug midazolam in her system.
I looked at her GP and we both looked at each other and were astounded. It was in her blood and her stomach. This is odd. This is not the normal thing.
The inquest into the unexplained death of 31-year-old nurse Susan Annis revealed she had remains of a medical drug in her blood and stomach. But how had it got there?
Midazolam is used for invasive procedures. It doesn't knock you out like an anaesthetic, but what it does do, you have a sort of an out-of-body experience and you don't feel any pain. Depending on how much of a dose you get, it makes it difficult for you to recall what has happened during the invasive procedure.
So if you've had something unpleasant done, you won't remember a thing. It works very rapidly, within a minute or so. It's very, very quick. In its proper place, it's an excellent drug.
But for somebody like Susan, who had a heart condition and was also drinking alcohol, it would have been a risky one to use.
Very odd to be in her stomach. She would have ingested it, and Sue didn't take drugs.
The coroner discussed this with a doctor, and he had said she probably took this midazolam to help her to sleep. Well, this doctor obviously didn't know exactly what midazolam was used for, and the coroner hadn't bothered to consult anybody else. It was ridiculous. Nobody in the nursing profession would have used it.
Never known her to take any sleeping tablets, even when she was on nights.
Midazolam wasn't particularly a drug that you would take yourself. It just didn't make sense why she would have that.
The coroner actually dismissed that a cause of death could be midazolam. After hearing all the evidence, the medical records, he directed that the cause of death was from an irregular heartbeat.
It was assumed to be natural causes. That was it. The inquest didn't solve it, so there was an open verdict. In effect, the open verdict means there is no verdict. And surely it should lead on to further investigation of what had gone on, but it didn't.
So that was it.
There was this bad vibe. It was most peculiar, most peculiar.
When you know something just isn't right, it can be really hard to shake that feeling. However, Susan's friends and family had to do just that and try and get back to some form of normality.
The coroner had made his ruling and we just got on with grieving for Sue. We weren't very happy, but what else could we do? But John Parsley wouldn't let it lie. He was very close to Sue and very upset about her death. He couldn't believe that there wasn't any cause, any definite cause.
He simply couldn't let it go, and I think on 2 counts. 1, he knew her, and 2, he had medical knowledge. And putting those 2 parts of information together simply didn't add up for him. So he had a bit between his teeth going, I have to get to the bottom of this because it simply doesn't make sense to me.
I decided to ring the poison centre at Guy's Hospital. And I said, this drug midazolam, when it's swallowed, does it have a different effect when it's injected? And he said, I can get it all sent through to you.
The article from the Poison Centre gave John crucial information. When midazolam is swallowed and the liver processes it, a byproduct is created called hydroxymidazolam.
It's an active drug, so you've got to add that level to the level of the midazolam. You add the 2 together, and that gives you the true level when you've swallowed it.
This higher level of midazolam would have been possibly life-threatening for Susan.
I wrote to the coroner, gave him an explanation, said this needs measuring, and he measured it, but didn't do anything. He said this takes us no further. So nothing happened.
John just couldn't believe that Susan, a highly trained nurse, would have willingly used such a drug that was not only dangerous, but also difficult to take.
At the time, the midazolam in the UK was only available in an injectable form, so it came in glass ampoules. So if you wanted to swallow it, you would have to break open the glass ampoules. But if you're a professional person, it would not be your first choice. Even if you didn't have the alcohol and you didn't have a heart condition, you still wouldn't take that one. You would take something in tablet form and swallow it. If you've taken it to sleep, why aren't the ampoules there? Because it works very quickly. So it had to be used very near to where she died. And it's not realistic to suggest she took it herself. It's just nonsense.
John suspected something more disturbing had gone on, but the open verdict remained on Susan's death.
There's no way someone is going to end up with midazolam in their stomach and in their blood unless really someone else gave it to them. But you feel in a way that you can't do anything about it because you don't have the resources to do it.
Frustratingly, it seemed Susan's friends and family would get no answers. John didn't want to raise false hope, so hadn't told her parents, David and Audrey, about what he had discovered and the coroner's reaction. Susan's funeral had taken place before the inquest.
The crematorium was absolutely packed. Her friends, her family, doctors, nurses, ambulance crew. There was tall strapping paramedics crying. It was just really sad. But it was very Sue. We walked in and the music playing was Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me, Baby. And it was very Sue, and it was a lovely service. It was just overwhelmingly sad. Kevin Cobb was there at the front of the crematorium with Sue's parents. They were thanking him for attempting to resuscitate Sue and for what he'd done.
The years passed after Susan's death, and in April 1998, the Children's A&E unit was opened at Crawley General Hospital and dedicated to her memory.
I returned to Crawley, back working with John and the rest of the team, and we always talked about Sue, the sadness of her death and the suddenness. It was all unexplained still.
She wasn't forgotten, but I suppose you would say life carries on, you know.
In that same year, out of the blue, a passing comment suddenly brought the mystery to John's attention once again.
It happened to be on Sue's birthday. By pure coincidence, it was as if somebody had said, right, enough is enough, we're going to sort this out. I was invited to a retirement party. It was a nursing sister who was retiring at Chertsey, where Kevin Cobb had been working. She said, have you heard about Kevin? She said, I don't think there's anything in it. She said, but he's meant to have raped someone in casualty. And I said, well, that's impossible because it's so busy. People are walking in and out all the time. You're not left alone for that period of time. And she said, yes, but the funny thing is, the police say there was midazolam in her system.
It was still early days, but it looked like the truth behind Susan's tragic death may finally come to light.
And I can't remember whether I said this or actually just thought it. He definitely did it.
After hearing that male nurse Kevin Cobb had been accused of sexually assaulting somebody in hospital, John Parsley wanted the unexplained death of his friend and colleague, nurse Susan Annis, reinvestigated.
I rang the police and I said, what they might like to do is Westminster Coroner's Court, early 97, the case of Susan Annis. I just wanted them to just look at it, because when they look at it, if they're of suitable experience, they're going to get it straight away. A few days later, Jim Dickey rang me.
A detective inspector at the time, Jim Dickey was working with the Met's murder squad, but had been reallocated to oversee the case of Kevin Cobb and investigate the possibility he was a serial rapist.
Kevin Cobb allegedly had assaulted 3 female patients at St Peter's Hospital. 2 of the victims made allegations of indecent assault or rape when they had been administered midazolam by Kevin Cobb. One of them, I think, remembered it quite clearly because the dosage she was given wasn't sufficient to knock her out properly. Another one vaguely remembered that something wasn't right about the procedure that she'd undergone, and they reported it to the police. A third one came forward as a result of a police appeal.
Sometimes people who enter the caring profession exploit the persona of caring, but actually what's going on underneath them is a real need to have power, control, and the attention of others.
It was in the middle of the rape investigation into Cobb that Jim heard about John Parsley's call to the police.
He believed that Susan's death was suspicious and may have been caused at the hands of Kevin Cobb. I looked at it and thought, yes, this is suspicious. I don't agree with the coroner's findings either.
The inquest believed Susan's death was most likely due to her heart condition, but never really accounted for the midazolam found in her system. Jim wanted to re-examine the evidence, but he knew 2 years on, the chances of any forensic material remaining was slim.
The pathologist would have removed Susan's stomach contents, bagged them up forensically and sent them off to a toxicologist.
Jim tracked down the toxicologist who'd received them at Charing Cross Hospital.
I said, you haven't by any chance got Susan Annis's stomach contents still, have you? She paused for a second and said, I always thought this case was suspicious. Just let me have a look and see if it's in my fridge. And I was left hanging on the phone in great anticipation of what the answer was going to be. She came back 5 minutes later and said, yes, we've still got it.
It was an incredible stroke of luck. Clearly, it wasn't just family and friends that believed that Susan's death was suspicious.
The toxicologist found midazolam in Susan's stomach contents, but wasn't happy with what the coroner directed and disagreed with it. And that's why she had kept the stomach contents. You have to bear in mind they haven't got a huge amount of storage, and it has to be kept forensically sealed, and it has to be refrigerated.
Susan's stomach contents were reanalysed at a police forensic science lab.
There was midazolam in a sufficient amount to cause heart palpitations. We consulted with two eminent professors, and they said, in their view, without a doubt, it would have caused Susan to collapse and die.
Jim believed Kevin Cobb spiked Susan's cider with midazolam. He phoned John Parsley to let him know that his efforts to uncover the truth about his friend's death had finally paid off.
He said, well, between us two, I believe she's murdered. Belief. Somebody's dealing with it, and they're believing things.
No ifs or buts, it was a murder investigation, because I strongly believe to this day Kevin Cobb caused recklessly or deliberately the death of Susan Annis in order to stupefy her to have sexual relations with her.
Any parent would want answers as to what had really happened to their child, so it was important for the police to inform Susan's parents about what they had uncovered.
One of the most harrowing and also satisfying tasks I had as the investigating officer was to tell Susan's parents that Susan's death was suspicious. And when we told them that we'd reopen the investigation, it was like a huge cloud had been lifted off their shoulders. And it was palatable. I could actually physically feel it.
Almost relief, because I felt I knew that Susan hadn't died naturally. But I knew that this man had done it.
Jim believed they had sufficient grounds to get Cobb into custody.
Early in the morning, we knocked on the door. Kevin Cobb answered it. I said, "You're under arrest for murder." And he went white, and he tried to shut the door. I pushed him back, and we entered the house, and I said, "We're going to search it now."
I just would love to have seen his face when you've got away with it for 2 years, and suddenly, out the blue, the police are on your doorstep and arresting you.
It was that stage I realised that Kevin Cobb's wife was present. We sat her down, explained why we were there. We then searched the house and we found no midazolam. We found other drugs, but again, that's not hugely surprising, bearing in mind his wife was a doctor. There were no dangerous drugs there that I can recall.
However, the police already had some forensic evidence against Cobb as a result of the ongoing rape investigation.
Surrey Police, when they received the complaints from female patients, the police attended the hospital and took his trousers and smock from him. And on the smock, and I think in the pockets, were traces of midazolam. And they did an inventory of the midazolam stock and found that there were capsules missing.
In a police interview, officers grilled Cobb about the death of Susan Annis and the rape allegations.
He, of course, didn't admit any of it, but it was put to him in very strong terms that his justification for this was his sexual deviancy. He didn't say yes and he didn't say no.
Susan had been a much-loved member of the nursing community, and it had been hard for anyone to understand how she had died. Now detectives had a lead. Another nurse. But who was Kevin Cobb?
Subsequently, other nurses came forward. He was described as being quite a lazy nurse. He did what he had to do. He was in his mid-30s. He was a staff nurse, and by all accounts, he was frustrated and thought he was worthy of further promotions. And in fact, one nurse told us that he was into what she termed risky sex. She had sex with him on hospital wards, in cupboards, in a hospital, all that sort of stuff. So I think he's very controlling, very manipulative, and what he wanted he got by administrating drugs to patients and colleagues.
It's all to do with power, and these women, who are professional women, who got careers, getting on with life, are confident, they're the ones he picks on.
Think about drugging someone and then assaulting them. You are taking away all their, their rights, their power and their control, and you're imposing yourself on them, and there's nothing they can do about it. Now, that might speak to someone who actually may have very low self-esteem. Anybody who has to make somebody feel this big or render them helpless in order to feel self-worth doesn't feel great about themselves.
As a nurse, we're there to look after patients. We have a duty of care to protect from harm. And the thought that he'd been drugging and raping these women in A&E whilst on duty, it was unthinkable. It made me feel sick. Poor Sue didn't know what he was like. He'd given Sue the drug to rape her. Unfortunately, she died. And then a couple of years later, he's still drugging people. What kind of person would do that?
Kevin Cobb, a male nurse, had been accused of drugging and sexually assaulting 3 women in hospital. Now he had been arrested on suspicion of murdering nurse Susan Annis over 2 years earlier. The evidence was all pointing at Kevin Cobb. But had he meant to kill Susan?
His version of events was she had a can of cider, I think he had a beer. Didn't mention that he'd administered midazolam. But we proved he did because it was in her stomach contents. How else would it have got there? Susan Annis and Kevin Cobb were alone, so everyone's pretty unsure how long it took for him to react to the fact that she'd gone into a heart seizure and how long it took for him to call for help. He clearly panicked, but how many minutes went by? What did he do with the evidence that he had? Did he dispose of it before he called someone else? And I think he did. There is residue left after you break a capsule and put the liquid in a cider can. Where was that? Police never found it. And that takes time to dispose of those things. He tried to cover his tracks. Fortunately, he couldn't get to Susan's stomach contents.
If you put something in someone's drink and they've already got a heart condition, which you probably know about, she's an open person, so everybody knew she had it. It wasn't a secret. Midazolam and the alcohol, they both will affect your breathing. It's reckless. It's dangerous to do that. He didn't care enough. He doesn't care if it risks your life. At the funeral, Audrey had thanked him for being there when Sue had died. I think even now, if you ask her about that, she'd find that really hard to take, that she actually thanked him, for being there, that she didn't die alone.
What we see at Susan's funeral is a real display of cockiness. There he is apparently showing empathy and caring and tears. Somebody who's almost thinking, I know something you don't, and I've put myself in the spotlight at the heart of your grief as if I'm a caring person, but I'm not.
Jim Dickey was determined that Cobb would not get away with his multiple crimes.
I arrested him for murder. We sent the papers to the Crown Prosecution Service, and counsel said there is a question mark over whether he knew that she had an underlying health problem. Basically, it could have been an accident caused by his actions without the intent of trying to kill her.
Jim Dickey said if we put it as manslaughter, we can get it all tried in one go.
He was charged with manslaughter, administering a stupefying drug, i.e. the midazolam, on Susan and the 3 other female victims. He was charged with a rape, an attempted rape, and sexual assault. Kevin Cobb pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Charging Susan's killer with manslaughter was disappointing, but all that really mattered was that Kevin Cobb was brought to justice, ending years of torment for her loved ones.
We had a police officer who came with us every morning up to the Old Bailey for the trial.
And they were there for us and to give us support.
Yep.
And that's what they did, didn't
Yep.
they? Absolutely fantastic.
I took a glance at Cobb, and I think it's just his demeanour. I don't think, but he was like smirking.
He sat in the court and grinned at everyone. He'd sort of sit and go like this, and he must have thought he knew what I'd like to do with him. Cocky.
We didn't know him as an individual person, and he was just cocky in the court. Yes, he was most objectionable.
You could feel the tension in the court.
There was one woman who gave very good evidence. She was in A&E, and Kevin Cobb had given her this drug. He didn't really sedate her so much, so she was, although she was partly sedated, she was very much awake to what was going on as it happened. And he raped her, and she remembered all the details about what he'd done to her. And her evidence at the trial was so powerful.
She said, "Why are you doing this to me?" And he said, "Oh, you can remember this now, but you won't later." But she did.
It's incredibly hard to report sexual assault because it's such a violation of a human being. And you've been exposed, humiliated, somebody has, literally inflicted their control over you. And then to come forward and have to reveal all that takes an enormous amount of strength.
The jury, I don't think were out that long. Unfortunately for Cobb, I think the majority were women, and they saw through his lies.
After a 4-week trial, Kevin Cobb was found guilty of all charges. He was given 7 life sentences.
Cobb did look upset at that stage. So it had hit him then.
Justice had been served at last. But imagine if Cobb had administered a larger quantity of midazolam to his final victim. He might have escaped conviction altogether.
I don't know how this man, who's a nurse, could do such an evil thing. But how can you do that? He took away an intelligent, loving, caring girl. He took part away of both of us.
Unfortunately, Sue happened to be his target. Sue would have been happy he was convicted and sent to prison because that's where he belonged. He's a disgusting nurse and a disgusting human being.
Kevin Cobb was convicted of manslaughter, 2 counts of rape, and 4 of administering drugs with the intention of committing sexual assault.
Audrey was very pleased about the fact that he wouldn't be able to do it to other women.
We're so grateful that John Parsley was Susan's colleague and got the police to follow things up. Otherwise, without John Parsley, Susan would have been declared a natural death, and that would have been the end of it.
You do your bit, and then that's all you can do, isn't it? And it's for other people to move it on and deal with it as they think fit.
Considering it was over 2 years between when Susan was attacked and when Kevin Cobb was caught, you have to wonder if he attacked more women.
I think Kevin Cobb is a serial offender, and I think there are many more victims out there. And granted, a lot of them may not know they were victims.
With midazolam, it causes amnesia. It doesn't stay long in the blood. So unless these women have flashbacks with any evidence, he's a menace to women.
Kevin Cobb served 15 years in prison before he was released.
Cobb is out now. Susan's dead. It might be on the sexual offenders register, but life, in my view, should mean life. But Kevin Cobb will no longer practice as a nurse.
It's nearly 25 years since Susan Annis died, and her legacy survives with her family and friends.
She was very driven. She would have gone further. She was in a happy relationship. She could have had family, children, and it's just sad that she's just not here to see all that. And here I am still working in emergency nursing, but now as a senior nurse myself. Sue was the beginning of that, and things I do now, I do think of Sue because she mentored me well.
She's not forgotten. She's still remembered with affection. And of course, when I do see Mr. and Mrs. Annis, when I go round there, her pictures are everywhere. And of course, I do talk about her. They want their child to be remembered. They don't want a photograph book with one person cut out.
Distracted by the finer things in life. He looks shattered and he's broke. And all you have to do is find that guy who's perfect for you. And the fine line between wrong and right.
When you're part of a close community that shares the same beliefs, culture, and way of life, where everyone is a friend, you'd think you would be safe and secure.
They've said it's trauma, so it's been blocked out. I can't remember anything.
It was just quite an horrific scene, really, you know, for somebody to die in those circumstances.
When friendships turn to love, things can get complicated, and sometimes those very friends can become your greatest threat. In 2011, Blackheath in southeast London was the unlikely setting for a gruesome crime that made national headlines.
This is where the car was set alight and where the police saw Gagandeep from. So that's the side that they saw the car burning. And it's this tree that it was burnt, fully black. It's got life again in it. It's sad coming here, but it just feels that this is where he is, and he's probably looking down at us, and you know, he knows that we do remember him every day.
21-year-old Gagandeep Singh lived 5 miles away from Blackheath in Bexleyheath with his mother, Tajinder, and sister Amandeep.
Every mom said, my son is very nice, my child is very nice, but Gagandeep is very loving child, very, very lovely, naughty. And when he grew up, he is very, very intelligent student.
He was 3 years older than me. He was mature and I was very immature. We'd have our sort of brother-sister arguments, typical fights and stuff. But we loved each other, but we didn't really express it as much as I now feel that I should have.
And he is very, very good businessman. I'm using is because I always think he is with me. I never said was.
Gagandeep's parents, Tajinder and Charanjit, were originally from Punjab in India before moving to the UK and setting up a successful employment agency.
Gagandeep got involved from a young age because Mum and Dad would be working and there was nowhere for us to go, so we used to go to the office.
He's only 8-year-old when he started to make veggies with me, and he is with me all the time after school. Then he started to using computer.
A family trip back to India inspired Gagandeep to embrace his faith.
But when he turned 17, he actually became a baptized Sikh. You have to be natural as the way God sent us down. So he stopped cutting his hair, he would cover his head with a turban. And from then, Sikhism was basically everything to him.
In 2009, another trip to India tore the family apart. Their father, Charanjit, had gone to visit an accountant friend he had been sending money to buy property in Punjab.
However, the accountant was actually buying them in his own name.
And my husband go there and ask, can you give the paperwork to me? And he hired the man and shoot him.
And that's when my dad was killed. And going through that was very, very hard, very difficult.
The murder of Charanjit in India hit the family hard, especially Gagandeep, who stepped into his father's shoes.
I have a heart attack after my husband's death. I can't do any business, nothing. And he doing everything.
Gagandeep's business career blossomed. As well as running the family firm, he also launched a new television channel, Sikh TV. By the age of 21, he was a millionaire.
He help everywhere where he think there is a need. Give food to people. He give jobs to people.
It was a typical act of generosity by Gagandeep that brought Harvinder Shoka into his life. A 20-year-old trainee electrician he met at his local Sikh temple.
Harvinder explained that he wasn't getting a job because of his beard and he had a turban, so Gagandeep actually gave him a job. They were almost like brothers. If Gagandeep wasn't here, he was at their house, or he was here.
Then Mundil Mahil entered the friends' lives.
Mundil Mahil was a 19-year-old medical student at Brighton and Sussex Medical School. She was in the second year of her studies and on course to be a doctor. A bright young girl with plenty of opportunity ahead of her. Harvinder Shokar was, I think it's fair to say, obsessed with Mundil Mahil. She seems to have told him that they were destined to be friends, not lovers, but nonetheless that she liked him, and I think there are suggestions that she sort of strung him along to get him to do things for her.
Then Gagandeep also became interested in Mundil when he met her at a Sikh festival in 2009.
Shortly after that, he sent her a friend request on Facebook. She saw that he was a friend of Harvinder Shokar and accepted the request, and from then on they seemed to get closer.
When you start a new relationship with someone, you share yourself, but also reveal your vulnerabilities, and sometimes those same weaknesses can be used against you.
After my dad's death, Gagandeep relied on Mundil a lot, so for emotional support. And after that, it seemed like their relationship built and built.
But Gagandeep's mum was worried.
I straight said to Gagan, I don't like that girl. Don't spend your time. Don't waste your time with this girl. She going to the temple and pub and club, and she's not baptized. Don't be too serious. And he said, she's just my friend.
I don't know if it was a one-sided thing, because Gagandeep never actually mentioned it at home. We knew there was more than friendship, but that's all we really know.
I think it's fair to say Harvinder Shokar was beginning to get a bit jealous as well about that happening.
If you think about jealousy, what is jealousy? It has its strong roots in fear. Fear of losing love, fear of losing attention, of being central to someone. There are often three people involved. There's the jealous person, there is the subject of the attention, and there is a rival. And the jealous person often feels huge levels of animosity towards their rival.
As Gagandeep and Mundil got closer, it seemed he wanted more from the relationship.
Things seemed to be progressing with Gagandeep Singh and Mundil Mahil until August 2010, when he came on strong to her, if you want to put it that way. I think he wanted to go further than she did. She fought him off, she says. I don't think that was disputed. He was deeply apologetic afterwards, but I think that marked a turning point in their relationship and a cooling.
Gagandeep and Mahil's relationship was frowned upon because within the Sikh community it's somewhat taboo and culturally inappropriate for individuals to be involved romantically in a relationship outside of marriage. The allegation of sexual assault would have affected Mahil and Gagandeep negatively.
Mundil Mahil didn't report the incident to the police. But despite Gagandeep bombarding her with apologetic calls and texts, the pair didn't see each other for the next 6 months.
What I don't think he appreciated was how deeply she felt about what had happened. I think feelings inside her festered. She felt that he needed to learn a lesson, and I think as well that Mundil Mahil then used Harvinder Shokar's sort of friendship, if you like, his almost puppyish devotion to her, to work out how to get some kind of revenge.
I wonder if Harvinder's romantic obsession for Mundil might have also had built into it the desire to protect her. And all these emotionally intense things going on within him may have driven him on and motivated him to prove to her his worth.
This all sort of gathered momentum, if you like, until events unfolded on a day in February the following year, 2011, when she invited Gagandeep Singh to come down to Brighton.
It's a fine line between love and hate, and when you throw in jealousy, it's easy for things to get very, very complicated. On the 25th of February 2011, Gagandeep told his family he was going to a party and asked to borrow his sister's blue Mercedes as his car had broken down.
I gave the keys to him, and it was around 7 o'clock in the evening that he went.
I asked Gagandeep, what time you come back? And he said, a little bit late, Mom. But he never come back.
It was on the morning of the 26th of February in the early hours that a police car was patrolling around the Blackheath area, saw a Mercedes on fire in Angerstein Lane. They alerted the London Fire Brigade, who turned up and put the fire out. The vehicle was searched. The boot of the car was opened, and that was the point they found the body in the vehicle.
At 2 a.m, Detective Chief Inspector Damien Elaine and his team were called out to investigate the fire.
The vehicle had been severely burnt, but wasn't wholly burnt out. The body was found inside, laying on its side in the fetal position, but it was bound with some form of flex, and there was signs of sort of a burnt covering of some description that had covered the body. Some people think that you're able to dispose of a body through fire, but actually it's quite difficult to do. So the body was intact, albeit that it was heavily charred. It was just quite an horrific scene, really, you know, for somebody to die in those circumstances.
When someone is burnt in a car, it's a very intense and extreme form of killing. Ultimately, the offender is harboring an intense rage towards the victim. Forensically, in these kind of cases, it's difficult for authorities to establish any DNA evidence from the crime scene of not only the victim, but also the offender.
At that stage, we didn't know the identity of the victim, but what we did have was the registration number of the vehicle, which came back to an address in Bexley Heath, which was a few miles away from that location.
If someone turned up at your door in the middle of the night, you would know something was wrong. But it's hard to imagine the horrific news that the Singh family were about to hear.
At 4 o'clock, door knocked and police outside. I'm scared.
So we've gone down and we've opened the door, and they're asking us about where Gagandeep is.
I don't know. He went to the party last night.
And they've started asking me about details of the vehicle and what he was wearing and where he said he was going. The police gave us information in chunks. 1 minute they're saying that there's a car, but there's nobody in there, and that they can't find Gagandeep. And then they mentioned that there was a body in the car, and then that the car's been burnt. So in stages they were giving us pieces of information. Now I don't know whether it was because it would be too much for us to take in one go.
I think maybe somebody used Gagan's car. Somebody done something Gagan's car and Gagan ran away.
Although they couldn't say so, the police were concerned that the body in the car was Gagandeep.
They took hairs from his comb and his toothbrush.
And the reason we were doing that was to try and obtain DNA that we could compare to try and identify who the victim was.
While they waited for forensic results to come back, Damien Elaine's team scoured the crime scene for evidence.
Was this the murder site or was it a deposition site? And typically you'll find that there can be a link, a geographic link to where a body's been deposited, you know, how far away the offenders live, and that's how you can start knocking on doors to see if anyone saw or heard anything. But equally looking at where cameras are. So London has probably got the most CCTV of any capital in the world.
There were no eyewitnesses, but at one end of the lane, a camera did catch something.
It identified two individuals that appeared to be running from the scene at about the time the fire was set, and it certainly appeared to us that one of those individuals was wearing a turban. It's not good enough to depict any facial images, but certainly key in terms of, well, what happened and who might be involved.
While the investigation continued, Amandeep had desperately been trying to track down her missing brother.
I started contacting friends. People started posting on Facebook to try and find out where he is. So I sort of spread the word and then came back and sat with the police.
We ran the vehicle registration number through the automatic number plate recognition system, and we were able to determine that the vehicle had travelled the night before around the M25 and down the M23 in the direction of Brighton, in the Clackett Lane services on the M25, and we were able to obtain footage of the individual driving that vehicle that night, a male going into the shop and buying a cuddly toy, soft toy, and some other items, and we were later to determine that that was Gagandeep Singh.
One of Gagandeep's friends then gave Amandeep some vital information.
Gagandeep went to see Mandil, and the friend had warned Gagandeep, don't go. You've not spoken to her in a while, don't go. And all of this was news. It was new to me because I didn't know anything that was happening. So I then called Mandil. And I asked her, where's Gagandeep? Has he been there? And she said no. And I said, well, I've found out he has. And she said, oh, yes, he came, but he left from downstairs. He didn't come inside. So in that same sort of minute of talking to her, she changed twice. So first she said he didn't come, and then she said, oh, yes, he did come. And that's what I told the police.
Up until this point, the police had no idea what Gagandeep's car was doing in Brighton. It would prove to be critical to the investigation.
We were starting to piece the jigsaw together. It was likely that Gagandeep was our victim, although to some extent the family was still holding out hope that it perhaps wasn't him. And even one of the males we'd seen on CCTV was in fact Gagandeep leaving that scene.
So I called Harinder Shaker and I asked him, do you know where Gagandeep is? Because he has not been home. And he's giggled on the phone and said, no, I haven't said anything funny, so why is he giggling? And that sort of, I got a bit suspicious, as in he must know something. And I told that to the police as well.
The badly burnt body was still unidentified, but the pathologist's report made for chilling reading.
The victim had suffered blunt trauma injuries, significant injuries to the head and to the body. But one of the most important things that came out of that post-mortem was the fact that actually he'd died as a result of smoke inhalations. Soot deposits were found in his lungs and in his larynx as he breathed in those toxic fumes. So when the fire was set in Blackheath, he was still alive.
The burning car and body had been discovered around 2 a.m. By 9 p.m. the same day, the DNA results were revealed.
We'd identified formally that the victim was Gagandeep Singh, and obviously that was a difficult point for us in terms of then having to tell the family, that it was their loved one.
It's a mum and dad's biggest fear that something terrible could happen to their children. But when a child dies before a parent, it upsets what is considered to be life's natural order.
Before the police actually confirmed it, they had taken Mum to the hospital because she's got a weak heart. And the police came to me and confirmed that it is him and you need to go and tell your mum. So they had sort of a team of doctors around her in case something happened. And it was like I knew since sort of mid-afternoon, I kind of knew that that's what the end result was going to be, but it was just wishing it doesn't happen.
They took me hospital because I am breathless, and there they said, in blue Mercedes boot, he's Gagan. After that, I don't know what happened.
she was stuttering and saying things that didn't make sense. And I thought, oh God, I don't know what's happening to her now.
And I said, I want to die. I want to die because I can't handle this. Because when he go from home, he's laughing, cuddling me. Mom, I come back very soon. And then I ask Ben a little bit late, but he never come back.
Police had confirmed that the body found in the car in Blackheath was Gagandeep Singh.
And I hadn't cried because I didn't know how to react. And that's when everyone sort of sat me down and they're like, you need to cry, you need to let it out. But yeah, it was just, I think I was so shocked that there was no emotions. It was too much to handle.
Gagandeep had last been seen alive outside Mundil Marhill's flat in Brighton. The team had a warrant to search her address. Mundil Marhill was nowhere to be seen.
So we're here just outside of the centre of Brighton. It's a typical student digs area, Victorian townhouses divided into separate bedsits. And this is where Mundil lived with her fellow students. So in Mundil's room, which was at the rear of the property in the basement area, we found that there'd been some sort of a struggle in there. There was a camera tripod in there, which we believed may have been used in the attack in terms of blunt trauma. There was a brand new duvet cover and a receipt for the new duvet cover that was purchased after Gagandeep had visited on the Friday night.
Gagandeep's car was filmed arriving at 11 p.m. the previous night. 20 minutes later, a neighbour reported seeing something suspicious.
They'd looked out of the window and they'd seen two males carrying out a bulky object that was wrapped up in something, and it was deposited into the boot of a car. The car was a Mercedes, and the neighbour had taken a note of the vehicle registration number, which, lo and behold, was the same registration number of the Mercedes found at Blackheath.
At Brighton railway station, the police inspected security camera footage captured earlier that night. It showed Mundil greeting two men arriving off the train from London.
We knew, having interviewed the witnesses at the address, that one of those individuals was Ashoka and somebody else by the name of Darren, and we began to look at that name, look at people connected to Ashoka, and we were quickly able to find out that, that individual was Darren Peters.
Both Harvinder Ashoka and Darren Peters lived in the Blackheath area near the site the car was set alight. Within 24 hours of finding Gagandeep's body, the police moved in.
We had sufficient grounds to arrest Ashoka, and we conducted that arrest, and he was taken to Lewisham Police Station, and we began interviewing him. He was quite surprised on the face of it. Darren Peters, we arrested him subsequently. We raided his address and we found some petrol cans, and we were also later to establish that he'd used the victim's bank card to withdraw some money.
The evidence police were gathering revealed that this attack had been carefully planned, but it's very difficult to imagine what motive there could have been for murder.
It became very apparent that the key to the whole of this case revolved around Mundil Marhill. She'd orchestrated this meeting, so we were urgently seeking her whereabouts. We'd circulated her at that point as a wanted person.
A case like this tends to come to the attention of somebody like me when the police are appealing for information, and I think it's fair to say that this was a notable case. In fact, shocking, many people would say. Somebody who seemed fairly sort of middle class and respectable, studying to be a doctor, accused of being involved in a murder.
Ports and airports had been alerted as police searched for 19-year-old Mundil Marhill. After questioning Mundil's housemates, police discovered her grudge against Gagandeep.
It was almost described to us as an attempted rape. Whether it had gone that far or not, I don't know. There was certainly no formal allegation that was made.
The news broke that this burning car had been found with the body in the boot and that 2 men had been arrested and their ages were given. The next day, Mundil Mahil contacted the police.
I've seen this footage on the television. I think somebody I know may have come to some harm. Would you like to speak to me? Whether she thought that she was going to be arrested or not, I don't know. But certainly, when she arrived, she was arrested as a suspect for murder.
While police were making progress with their investigation, Gagandeep's mother and sister had asked to see his body.
We were told that you shouldn't go because it's not something you want to sort of remember. But we felt we had to go.
Then they pull the curtain. I see girl bus. After that, I don't know.
I think there was a sense of relief that it's not a skeleton, and that we can see him. And that we can still see that it's him, it's not somebody else.
I'm shaking and fell off the floor. Faint. I never imagined somebody's son is like this.
It was becoming obvious that Mundil had set a trap for Gagandeep. But what happened next and what she knew about it was far from clear.
What was really important about the account she gave in interview was that her position was that Gagandeep had left of his own free will from Gladstone Place that night, got back into his car and driven himself out of Brighton back towards London. Now, we knew that clearly wasn't the case. We knew she was lying.
As police interviewed Mahil, Shoka and Peters, a clearer picture emerged of the terrible events that led up to Gagandeep's gruesome death.
We examined all the suspects' phones and the victim's phone in some detail, so we were able to put together chronology in terms of calls and text messages and contact on that evening.
Mundil Mahil invited Gagandeep Singh to come down to Brighton, where she wanted him to learn a lesson. I think there are arguments to this day about what exactly she meant by that. She asked Harvinder Shoka to come, and Darren Peters joined them, somebody that Harvinder Shoka knew.
The dynamics of them as a group were quite distinct and different. So you had Mundil, who was the sort of demure professional medical student. You had Shoka, who was the apprentice electrician. And you had Darren Peters, who was probably of the three, certainly the most unintelligent of the three of them, and seen very much as the person under Shoka's control and perhaps the hired muscle.
As Gagandeep was heading to Brighton that Friday night, it seems he became suspicious about why he was there.
He contacted Mundil, so you're not going to kill me, or words to that effect. I think Gagandeep, there was nervous anticipation, and I think he thought, I think things might be back on, I can start to rebuild a relationship with her. On his way down to Brighton, stopped off at the service station, contacted Mundil to say, look, I'm still en route. She, in turn, is then forwarding his progress, or the information about his progress, onto Shoka, who's travelling down with Peters by train. Arrives at the railway station to pick up Shoka and Peters, seemingly laughing and joking with them.
She asked her friends to stay out of the basement that evening. Harvinder Shoka and Darren Peters put sheets down, they donned black gloves and put clothes on over the ones that they were wearing, which might lead you to think there was a degree of premeditation about what was to come.
They sit around socialising, eating key lime pie, waiting for the arrival of Gagandeep, who's none the wiser about what was to unfold.
I mean, you could almost describe it as a a honey trap from Mundell's point of view. She has planned and set up this whole thing that's going to go down. You think this is a 19-year-old girl who has made an accusation of sexual assault, feels violated, has found someone willing to avenge that assault in her mind.
Gagandip Singh turned up at about 11 o'clock, as expected, and about 20 minutes later, his body was carried out of that flat, that shared house. In those 20 minutes, he was beaten, punched, coshed over the head with, it looks like a camera tripod that belonged to Mundell Mahil, crying out for help while she sat in the next room, ignoring his pleas.
That resulted then in him, probably heavily unconscious at this point, being carried out, bound and gagged, put into the boot of his sister's car, where then Shoker drove that car with Peters in the front passenger seat up to London.
At some point, they've stopped the car and used the cable from the sat-nav to tie Gagandip Singh's wrists together. And they brought petrol, 2 jerry cans of petrol, which were subsequently poured over his body while he was still alive. There were traces of petrol found in his lungs, as well as the smoke which he breathed in and the direct cause of his death. And they poured petrol in the back seat of the car as well and set the car alight before fleeing at about 2 a.m. in the morning. So 3 hours after Gagandip Singh turned up at the house in Brighton.
After the car was set alight, Shoker had in fact called Mundell on an 80-minute telephone call. And we now know that during the content of that call, Shoker had said to Mundell, "I'm willing to go to prison for you for 21 years.
Harvinder has obliterated his love rival, quite literally obliterated him in the most brutal way. And then to then brag about it to Mundell is a bit like, you know, bringing in the kill and going, look what I did for you. Here is the proof. It's like a prize.
Already reeling from the discovery that the body in the car was Gagandip's, his family now had to face the fact that his friends could have been responsible.
When they were arrested, Darren Peters, we didn't know. So we didn't really know what to think about him. But with Harinder Shoker, the community started saying that, oh, we saw him at the temple and he had a swollen hand. And with Mundell, because she lied to me that first day, I didn't believe a thing she was going to say. And it all started making sense. They've got something to hide.
But Ben police said the both person done this. Oh my God. I never think Mundell and Shoker did this.
Gagandip Singh's family, still in shock after his death, could not understand how he could have died at the hands of his best friend.
As a family, we didn't know that their friendship had sort of broken off. I think there was a difference in education. They were different in every way except religion. But towards the end, when Gagandip opened up his channel, he didn't have time for Harvinder because he had his own things to do, and that's where jealousy kicked in. We didn't know until after the death that any of this has even happened. People started sending me Facebook clippings of Harvinder commenting on Gagandip's profile saying, oh, he's a fake Sikh, he thinks he's a big man. So there was a lot of hate going on. And Gagandip obviously knew about this, but he never shared it at home because it was between friends.
And they not give a good answer why they kill Gagan. Nothing.
Mundell was trying to say that Gagandip raped her. Obviously, hearing that, we felt, you know, Gagandip's such a respected person. Whether there was a rape or there wasn't a rape, I can't comment. However, Mundell did say that it wasn't a rape, that he tried to get into bed with me.
In many ways, it can be described as an honor killing, given the cultural significance of the case. Usually, these types of killings are male on male. Rarely do you find that a female's involvement is the coordination and the facilitating of a killing of this nature. But having said that, Mahil was a self-righteous individual. She was an individual who made it clear that she wanted to harm Gagandeep.
I don't know how can they kill Gagan. I don't know. I don't know how can they kill. I have only his memories. If he's alive, now I am top of the world because I am Gagandeep's mom. But now, no life, nothing. All day crying.
The fondest memories of Gagandeep, I must admit that since he's passed away, I don't have any memories. They've been erased, so I can't think of anything. I've had counselling and they've said it's trauma, so it's been blocked out. I can't remember anything. I only remember from the day I see his body moving forward of what's happened, but not before. So I look at pictures and what my mum tells me, but I don't have any memory. They're coming back, but very, very slowly.
The Sikh community of southeast London was upset by the murder of Gagandeep Singh, and that two of his temple-going friends would stand trial for it.
There was a large funeral, there was a massive turnout, very, very good community support for the family. He was held in very high regard.
We tried to give him a really nice send-off, sort of similar to what would have happened at his wedding. So we kind of made it into a very good event for him.
Horses, he liked horses, and he liked the music. Flags, everybody come. Nobody, that day, nobody at home.
When it was his funeral, it was like, oh, Gagandeep's coming home today. Like, he's actually going to come home. And it was a sense of happiness, just seeing that there's so many people here for him. It made me feel very proud of him.
The time had come, finally, for Gagandeep's attackers to face trial, but it was far from clear who would be found guilty of his murder.
The trial started in December 2011. All the defendants, Mundell, Shoker and Peters, were charged with murder, and all had pleaded not guilty. There were various alternative charges on the indictment, and in terms of Mundell, her defence counsel was able to introduce an alternative charge of grievous bodily harm with intent as an alternative to murder for the jury to consider.
The jury's job would not be easy, as the co-conspirators suddenly weren't so cosy, and all turned on each other.
Mundell was quite demure. I think she wanted to portray herself as, this medical student from a caring profession, and her case was that she never knew that it was going to go as far as it did go. Certainly in her mind, she never thought for one moment it was going to result in murder.
Harvinder Shoker blamed Darren Peters for starting the violence. He said that Peters struck Gagandeep Singh first. But I honestly think that having laid out sheets, having taken the precaution of putting on gloves and clothing over their own, that there was a clear understanding violence was going to happen, and I think quite severe violence.
I hold my heart and sit in the court and listen what happened to Gagan that day.
After a 2-month trial, Darren Peters was acquitted of murder but convicted of manslaughter and was given 12 years, while Harvinder Shoker was found guilty of Gagandeep's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment to serve a minimum of 22 years.
I see the Shoker is crying when judge said 22 years. When he started crying.
When Shoker got his conviction, we were satisfied, not satisfied, but there was that sense of relief that it's going to ruin his life, and that's what we wanted. But Darren Peters got 12 years, but he only served 6, which is not fair. Somebody's lost their life, and he's out in 6 years.
As for Mundell Marhill, she was acquitted of murder and found guilty of grievous bodily harm with intent.
Her actions were calculating, and that she was at the heart of a criminal conspiracy with Shoker and Peters of tricking Gagandeep to Brighton to seriously assault him, which ultimately resulted in his death. In fact, under cross-examination, she was forced to admit that she had lied to police, suggesting that all she had done was to lure him to what she explained to be a few slaps and a lecture.
Mundell Marhill was sentenced to 6 years in a Young Offenders Institute. She was later released on licence after serving 3.
When we found out the sentence that Mundell got, it was a shock. I remember coming back on the train and there was so much anger. I kind of felt as if Gagandeep hasn't got the justice. We've lost everything.
As a senior investigator, was I disappointed that Mundell Marhill wasn't convicted of murder? Yes, I think so.
I think there are people who will think she got off lightly, and I don't think it's hard to understand why they would think that.
I think, focusing on the family, the tragedy for them to lose a father and a husband and a son and a brother in the space of 2 years is just incredible. And very, what are the chances of that happening to any family? To lose 2 loved ones, both from homicide in 2 wholly separate circumstances.
So we're in Blackheath at the moment, Angerstein Lane, where Gagandeep's car was set alight. This is where he was the last time. So there's a connection, and it's a feeling that this is where he was last alive and breathing.
His face is always in front of my eyes. Always laughing face. He always cuddled me. If I said anything to him, he never said no. Always, okay, Mom.
Because whenever I'm upset or sad, I feel that he's here. So it's just a sense of him being around. Well, he knows that we're always thinking of him, and I hope he's proud of everything that I'm doing. And we are trying to keep him alive as much as we can, every step of the way.
Sometimes you can have too much faith in people that it can blind you to their true natures. Unfortunately for Gagandeep Singh, those he thought were his closest friends were anything but.
Distracted by the finer things in life. He looks shattered and he's broke, and all you have to do is find that guy who's perfect for you. And the fine line between wrong and right.
Is there anywhere you feel safer or more protected than your own home? Particularly when you're surrounded by loving family and friends. In 2012, a Scottish village was devastated by the death of one of their own.
Murder, everyone shivers at that word. It's such a haunting word. Losing someone like that, it was earth-shattering.
You'd put the telly on and there's Jenny's face. That's hard.
This was a community where everyone knows, looks out, and cares for each other. But what happens when one of the very people you rely on turns out to be a cold-blooded killer?
Fertiviate is a little village about 8 miles from Perth. Perthshire generally is low crime. I would have to say most of the crime that does occur in Perthshire is in Perth itself. Fertiviate, everybody knows everybody. Crime extremely unusual. I struggle to think of a single call to Fertiviate prior to this murder being committed.
Jenny's life revolved around her husband, her son, her dogs, her cat, Rambo.
A pillar of the community, 80-year-old Jenny Mevin was a churchgoer, a staunch supporter of the Red Cross, and was also president of the local Women's Rural Institute.
Jenny just helped everybody. Jenny was extremely popular. You'll never get anybody to say a bad word about Jenny.
Margaret was Jenny's secretary for a while at the Rural Institute, and the pair became firm friends.
Because Jenny and I were both widows, we were our own support system at night. Jenny was a very outgoing person, extremely outgoing.
Margaret regularly visited Jenny with her granddaughter Susan, who also felt she was part of the family.
Jenny, she was very much like another grandparent to me. You could trust her with anything.
For her age, extremely fit, would walk and think nothing of walking 4 to 5 miles a day with her dog. She was always on the go. What she could do at her age would knock a lot of us to shame.
If you're ever having a bad day, she'd know how to make you laugh with something. She'd come away with some funny stories. She was very loyal, loving. She would never badmouth anyone. I never heard her say a bad word about anyone when I was growing up.
Jenny's husband died in 2006. But before then, they had been a very strong family group.
Jenny's husband was Andrew, known as Drew, the loveliest wee man. They'd had a very, very happy marriage.
The couple had a son, David.
Jenny and David had an extremely close relationship, so alike. Bounced off each other, same sense of humour, same temperament. So there could be, your arguments as well, as sons and mothers do. But no, very protective of each other, and Jenny just absolutely worshipped them. Once Drew died, David and Jenny, they became closer.
David ran and owned a very successful building contracting business in the Perthshire area, but stayed with his mother to look after her.
David is very, very private. Loyal, big, big animal lover. He's exceptionally busy, never takes a day off, never has a holiday. But no, very, very private.
Despite David being well off, for the next 6 years, he and his mother lived a very simple life. They kept themselves to themselves, but David did let somebody get close.
David and Willie have been friends about 20-odd years. Kind of best as friends, Willie and his wife cut the grass. We saw Willie a couple of times a week. And Jenny spoke of Willie. She'd said it was a friend of David's.
A 20-year friendship suggests bonds of trust that have been established, tested and reinforced. And if you like, that length of a friendship is almost longer lasting than many marriages. So clearly there were pillars of trust established. So William would have been welcomed into the mother-son dynamic, almost like an extended family member. He would have been part of their inner circle and would have known a lot about them. So it would have felt perhaps to the three of them, very safe.
I'd known him for a long time, and Davey thought he was an extremely close friend. Willie knew everything.
At the beginning of 2012, a shadow fell over the village of Forteviot. Local journalist Gordon Curry covered the story.
There had been a number of reports of high-value housebreakings, which looked very much like targeted sort of professional jobs. It very much looked like it may have been the same gang who were carrying these out. Obviously, this kind of thing would raise a lot of eyebrows locally.
On the 20th of February 2012, between 5-6 o'clock at night, I was notified that an elderly female's body had been found at premises in the Forteviot area, and there appeared to be some injuries on the victim's body, but no further details were available.
You knew something bad had happened, because it is such a small villages, and the amount of police cars.
When David Mevin got home that Monday, he was met by a sight that would change his world forever.
I subsequently learned that it was the victim, Jenny Methven. Her son, David Methven, found the body when he returned home that evening.
Just sirens upon sirens upon sirens. And we knew the road had been blocked off. Very surreal. Never seen so many police in my life. That day is actually quite a bit of a blur.
In the quiet rural village of Forteviot, a spate of burglaries already had the residents on edge. When on Monday the 20th of February 2012, David Mevin had found his mother dead in their home.
For somebody to leave his house, to leave his mum in the morning, go to your work and come back, and I think they were anticipating going out for a meal that night, to come back and be faced with what he saw when he walked into the house must have been devastating for the man, absolutely devastating. Quite brutal injuries had been inflicted on the poor woman, causing her death.
It was clear from Jenny's injuries that her attacker had intended to kill her. Police were now treating her death as murder.
The first time I've been back here since that late night, early morning. The house is directly through trees there. When I arrived here, the police presence was quite significant. There were several uniformed police officers here who'd put a cordon round the entire property, so there was nobody getting in or getting out of that crime scene without their details being noted.
With such a serious crime, a team was quickly put together. Divisional Superintendent Jim Leslie was brought onto the case.
This was a massive investigation right from the start. It involved every force in Scotland, number of forces in England. At its peak, we had 150 officers involved in it.
80-year-old Jenny Mevin had been declared dead at the scene. Catherine Kirkwood was in charge of the forensic team.
The lead biologist on the case was tasked to go out and carry out a forensic recovery of the body alongside a pathologist and other police staff, standing on step plates to avoid dislodging any potential footwear marks. The key here is preservation of all evidence types. Anything alien to the scene that might give an indication of who has been there.
When David found his mum, she was on the floor, wearing a jumper, trousers. I think one of her shoes had come off, one shoe was still on, and she had socks on. There was a lot of blood in that area of the body and in the general area of the kitchen where swings had been inflicted and probably blood on the weapon. Notably, when he arrived, her face had been covered with some cloth or sheet. Obviously, David had to remove that and saw the images of his mum underneath the sheet.
On the Monday night, I hadn't been able to get hold of her. And I'd phoned and I'd phoned and I'd phoned. Following day, I'd tried phoning, still nothing. Because Jenny inevitably phoned me at 8:30 in the mornings. Nothing. So I tried phoning David and couldn't get him. And then my pal across the road, I stay in the village further up, that something had happened at Jenny and David's. They weren't sure what it was. There was a lot of blue lights going. Well, I just went to pieces. And next thing, the whole village got descended on by the press.
The first time we heard about the case was a phone call which I received to tell me that there was a large police presence in Fortiviate village, which obviously suggested that something pretty serious had happened. Pretty quickly it became clear that a murder inquiry was going to get underway.
That's how we found out that Jenny... It was really, really hard. Because even the following day, nobody would say that she'd actually been murdered.
The post-mortem showed that Jenny died as a result of blunt force trauma, having been hit on the head at least 11 times. The injuries were such that it fractured her skull from the back to the front, and there was fragment of bone inside her brain. In addition to that, the poor woman had obviously put up some form of defence because both her forearms were also broken in a defensive manner, as if she'd raised them to try and stop the blows coming down on her. So she had suffered a terrible end to her life.
I think I went into a kind of shock system too for quite a while. You'd put the telly on it and there's Jenny's face. That's hard. You're in this situation that you've never been in your life before and you really don't know how to handle it.
When it happened, I was 10. I was 10 years old. I felt like my whole life had changed and just something had shattered completely. And I didn't, because I was so young, I didn't know how to handle how I felt. So I was just very quiet and cried a lot, but felt like nothing was the same. Losing someone like that, it was earth-shattering. I think I would have been easier to deal with if it was natural, old age, or an illness. But because it was murder, everyone shivers at that word. It's such a haunting word.
David Mevin does not wish to talk directly about what happened that day, or since, but wants his mother's story to be told.
Davey had to put Jenny's body down and try CPR. You know, when she'd been dead for, that's pretty horrific. Davey has never spoken about that.
Fortiviate was now the unlikely setting for a real-life murder mystery.
So this is Fortiviate, and about a mile, maybe less, from where Jenny Methven was murdered. Particularly where you have such a brutal crime being committed on your doorstep, had a massive impact on the local community. Everybody was looking over their shoulder.
Jenny was particularly well known, even by the bus drivers for walking her dogs. Just this total disbelief that anything like that could happen here.
There was concerns that it may have been in some way related to these previous housebreakings which had been going on in the area. So clearly they were looking at the possibility of robbery gone wrong. People were obviously concerned that whoever had carried it out was still at large.
The thought of anyone breaking into your home to steal is horrific. But the idea that those same people could be willing to kill is terrifying. Could those responsible for the local burglaries also be Jenny's killers?
It shocked everyone. Everyone was locking doors more than they did before, because where we stay, there's really no need for that. Nothing ever happened, ever does happen now. But to this day, people are still locking doors more than they used to, and more wary if they see someone in a field walking. Whereas before, no one really batted an eyelid if a man or a woman was walking across a field, whereas now people take second looks about it.
David was the first person to find Jenny dead when they returned around about 5:15 that afternoon. So we set to work to try and narrow down those time frames to try and pinpoint when the murder took place.
When there is a murder, the first suspect usually is somebody close. Really didn't see much of David the first few days. I think he went onto autopilot. Wouldn't really have known what was happening.
We'd looked at David and his background, as long as his mother's background, to see is there anything there that could have contributed or been a catalyst for this crime of violence. And there was nothing there.
With no evidence connecting son David to his mother's murder, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect, and a killer remained at large.
We started to investigate Jenny's last movements. She had missed a doctor's appointment on the afternoon of the killing, suggesting that possibly she was already dead at that time. We also managed to trace an old friend of hers who had been on the phone to her in the morning.
It looks like the last communication finished around about 10:30, and Jenny finished the call to say she heard a vehicle coming into her driveway. So that was the last contact she had.
Police believe it's likely Jenny heard her murderer driving. So officers scoured footage from traffic cameras, cataloguing vehicles on the roads near her home at the time.
We had daily press releases because we wanted to trace vehicles that had been captured in CCTV, so we released images of those vehicles to the press, and the drivers of the vehicles, most of them came forward, identified themselves, and were eliminated from the investigation.
As other routes reached dead ends, police hoped the forensic evidence they were collecting would shed some light on the killer's identity.
In this case, we could establish from the blood patterns that Mrs. Methven had been seated when blows were struck in the area of the kitchen.
We were now thinking more and more that this might have been a murder committed by somebody actually known to Jenny.
Her family, her friends and associates, what did they know? Could there be anything in Jenny's background that resulted in this murder?
The police hunting for the killer of Jenny Methven had ruled out her son David as a suspect, but had very little more to go on.
One of the significant findings in the case was a finger mark which had been left in blood on a telephone in the kitchen. The blood matched Mrs. Methven, which was not surprising. The fact that the finger mark was made in blood was significant because it must have happened at the time when Jenny's blood was still wet. Therefore, if the attack had been premeditated, there hadn't been thought given to wearing gloves. In looking at the blood spatter, we also made an assessment of how likely it would be that the perpetrator would have blood transferred onto their own clothing as a result of the attack.
The fingerprint didn't match anybody already on the police's database.
There was no obvious candidate for having carried out this crime. So clearly people were thinking, you know, was it somebody within the community? Was it the gang who'd been robbing houses?
We had discovered within the house a large sum of money. Our investigations had shown David's wealth. Might this have been a motivation for the crime?
I knew what Jenny was like with money. Banks, no, she didn't trust them. From what I know, a lot of the money was Jenny's, and they could account for it.
The money was still there, of course, which did suggest that potentially this had not been a robbery gone wrong, but this was potentially somebody who had knowledge of Jenny.
The forensic team had also found traces of DNA at the crime scene and on Jenny's body that didn't belong to her.
So we looked to eliminate people who may have had access to the house. 40-odd close friends, associates, family volunteered to give DNA and fingerprints for elimination purposes.
None of them were a match to the murderer.
Very often, when you have a murder, you've already got a good suspect, a good idea of motive, a good idea of who might have carried it out. In this case, we did not have that. We had not recovered the murder weapon. You're looking for an early breakthrough, but very often you just have to be patient and wait for that moment.
Jenny was a much-loved member of her community, with no known enemies, so who would want her dead? Well, inquiries were leading nowhere, and the police desperately needed something to go their way.
William Keane was a close friend of David Methven. He's been described as almost being like a brother to David Methven, and had a similar, very, very close relationship with Jenny Methven. About a month into the investigation, he made an attempt to take his own life, taking some tablets and cutting his neck.
The police investigation discovered a suicide note, although Willie had survived. The suicide note said that he was killing himself because he was scared he was going to get the blame for Jenny's murder, although he didn't do it.
Now all police attention zeroed in on Keane, who had known David for over 20 years and often did odd jobs for him and Jenny.
This was a big moment because Willie was already involved in the inquiry. He had already been interviewed and had obviously been at the house before. We identified that the car that he tried to commit suicide in had been picked up by CCTV in the area on the day of the crime, and also we were able to tie his phone into that area. So this was the big moment, the moment when we really thought we have a good suspect now.
Could this old family friend really be the person who mindlessly bludgeoned Jenny to death?
Ultimately, Keane ended up in Murray Royal Hospital, a secure mental institution in Perth, where he was for some time.
Legally, the police were not allowed to interview Keane while he was being treated at a mental health facility, but they were allowed to search his home.
A significant recovery was made in the garage of his home address, where a pair of trousers, blood-stained trousers, were recovered.
There had apparently been an attempt to clean these using bleach. One of the pockets had had the bottom cut off, we believed, to allow a hammer to be concealed down the leg of the trousers, a hammer being a likely murder weapon.
When William Keane recovered enough to be released from hospital, he was arrested.
Gutted. David was absolutely gutted. Couldn't believe it. Absolutely shocked.
David, he's trying to process the murder of his mother. That's a massive traumatic scar right there. Then his best friend attempts suicide, and in the suicide note says something about, I didn't do anything. This must have been, at some level, hugely disorientating for David because he may not know what to think.
William Keane was detained, suspected of murder, and taken to Perth Police Station, where biometric details were taken from him, fingerprints, DNA. It was noted that he made efforts to frustrate that somewhat by self-inflicted injuries to the tips of his fingers and the palms of his hand that would stop fingerprints being taken.
However, prints were obtained, DNA was obtained, and we got a match to the items discovered in Jenny's house.
Keane's prints were all over the murder scene. His was the bloody finger mark left on Jenny's phone.
Forensic examination of the recovered trousers showed DNA for William Keane as being the wearer of those trousers. And from blood that was recovered on them, the DNA of Jenny Methan.
In times of crisis, we all turn to our friends, and since the death of his mother, David had relied on William Keane. Now he was facing the horror that someone so close was responsible.
Sickened. Absolutely sickened that it was somebody so close to him that had done it. Even up until Willie was charged, Davy was still meeting up with him and having a coffee. It's horrendous that his mother, but then to discover that it's your so-called best friend or one of your best friends that's done it. You know, this person consoling you or whatever, and then discover that it's them. So it was a double blow.
It must have been very difficult for David to process that this murder, violent murder, was committed by somebody very close to him and his mother. Because you have to almost rewrite history and say, did I miss something? Have I been duped? You know, he's lost his mother to a violent death, and now he's lost his best friend. And now he's also lost his history with that best friend. And looking forward, he's got no one. So what a terrible place for David to find himself in.
If things weren't bad enough for David, Keane was refusing to admit anything.
When he was asked if he'd been at the house that day, he said, no comment. He did say, I never murdered Jenny. It was pointed out to him that his phone was in the area, and again, his reply was no comment. When he was asked how he would react if he was told that his DNA had been found on Jenny's arm, he said, I'd be gobsmacked. He just was not participating positively in the interview process.
Just over a month after her death, police officially charged William Keane with Jenny Mevan's murder.
There was a genuine sense of relief that they'd got somebody. This community didn't know him. He's not from here. Nobody here would have known Willie Keane.
The news of William's arrest was met by disbelief that it was somebody known both to Jenny and to David and liked by them, trusted by them. He wasn't a violent man. He wasn't a man given to dishonesty or criminal behaviour. He appeared to have a solid marriage. He had a son, and it's just very hard to understand how you go from being this to being a savage, brutal murderer.
Jenny's body had been found with a cloth over her head. Detectives felt that this was more than just a random act.
There's a school of thought, and I've experienced it in a small amount of murders, where if you get a party who is closely associated with the victim, it's not unusual to cover the victim's face if you're still in that area, so you don't have to see them, to stop you looking at the person you've killed because you're that close to them.
She never deserved that. No one does. She was a lovely person. And everyone has their own stipulation on why he did it.
The only conclusions I can come to is jealousy. of what David had.
Money is the obvious thing, although it was never really clear. William may have had financial problems, but certainly not to the point where, you know, he would have been expected to carry out this kind of act. And there was money in the house that wasn't taken, which would suggest that that wasn't the motive.
With Keane charged and in custody, David could finally lay his mother to rest.
It's a private funeral. Davy and I had gone through who would be there. And it was by invitation only. And the bit that shocked me was the media up a tree. That was bad.
On the 7th of August 2012, Keane went on trial for the murder of Jenny Mevin. He was still insisting he was not the killer. Not only that, in court, he made shocking accusations as to who was ultimately responsible for Jenny's death.
At the High Court in Glasgow, he entered a not guilty plea and had a special defence of incrimination, blaming David for the murder, or people that David knew had carried out the murder.
He tried to say that Davy had done this, he'd done that, he was a money launderer, drugs and all that. He tried to blame David, that it wasn't him, it was David.
Standing trial for the murder of Jenny Mevin, William Keane stunned everybody by incriminating her son David.
At the trial, Keane claimed that he had turned up at the house to pick up a couple of tyres and some paperwork that David had left. When there'd been no answer at the door, he had gone into the house, and there he had found Jenny lying, dying, on the floor. He had asked her what happened, and she had said, "David, David." He was obviously asked why he hadn't called 999, and his response was that he was worried about being blamed for the killing. He said that he had been told by David that David knew who had done it. It was his druggy friends, and that if Keane told, he could arrange to have him done in. Keane also claims that David offered him £30,000 a year for 3 years to keep quiet. So a very aggressive defence towards David.
Now, David Mevin found his private life being raked over in the cruelest way, at the cruelest time.
You'd see the headline of drug dealer or money launderer. The vast majority of the locals never believed the headlines. A lot of them found them ridiculous and funny.
I think further afield, I mean, I think they were damaging. I think people always think no smoke without fire.
Our local park got spray painted that Davy had done this, and Davy was a drug dealer, Davy was a money launderer. That's sick. After everything he'd been through, his mum was murdered, and someone does that.
He was left with nothing. His whole life had been there in the court. He was left with no privacy. There wasn't one vestige of Davy's life that they hadn't gone into. Yeah, and that must have been horrendous.
David was called on to give evidence in court and answer Keane's accusations.
The thing that stood out to me was David's reaction to it. The way he conducted himself. He portrayed himself with real dignity during a very, very difficult time.
There is a real selfishness here about what William did anyway, in that David has to stand up in court and defend himself and say he's innocent of the murder of his mother. Emotionally, he would have had to push to one side his own grieving process to defend himself, which means that grief process is delayed while he stands up in court facing the murderer saying, "I didn't do it." How many things would David have had going through his mind just to deal with just standing there that day? Must have been horrific.
Keane's version of events began to unravel in court.
His evidence was all over the place. It seemed to change from minute to minute. At one point, he looked at the jury and said that he didn't have a bad bone in his body.
There was a really strong case against Keane with excellent forensics. Thankfully, on this occasion, the jury did their job, they weren't distracted, and they came to the right verdict.
After a 10-day trial, William Keane was found guilty of the murder of Jenny Mevin. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the recommendation he serves a minimum of 22 years.
It was amazing. Usually you're found guilty and then you come back a couple of weeks later for sentencing. You get sentenced there and then. And that was pretty unprecedented. That was amazing. That was amazing that day.
David came out after the trial too upset to speak himself, but he had the police read a statement on his behalf.
Billy Keane was a friend of mine for more than 20 years. In fact, we were almost like brothers. I cannot begin to understand or forgive what he did to my mum. It was an act of betrayal, and his denials in the time since, and particularly during this trial, leave him beneath contempt.
The thing about betrayal in this instance is it's very deliberate. So this person had a choice about whether they killed Jenny. They had a choice about whether they lied about it, and they chose each time to do the wrong thing. That is a roller coaster of emotions that David would be on with his supposed best friend. And I think it would leave a very long traumatic scar. Can he ever trust anybody again?
If the family and friends of Jenny Mevin thought the guilty verdict was the end of the story, they were wrong.
William Keane, after he was found guilty, continued to protest his innocence. He launched a number of appeals, I think 4 in total. All appeals were ultimately rejected, and he remains in prison serving life for the 22-year minimum period.
In a surprise move, David Mevin then launched a civil action against William Keane.
He wanted acceptance that William had been responsible for his mother's murder. So he sued him for £160,000. And when William eventually backed down and gave up fighting it, he was effectively accepting blame for the crime.
Private prosecution was the only way that David was able to get Willie Keane to admit that he was guilty.
He won his case and was awarded, I think, around £86,000, which he said he would donate to animal charities that his mother had supported throughout her life and had worked for and volunteered for.
Keane was still insisting he was not the killer. Many years have passed since Jenny died, but the memory of her murder has stayed with all involved.
Today was the first time I was back at the house where the murder took place, and this is the first time I've been to the graveside where Jenny's buried. It reinforces to me this shattering event for the family, for the close friends and the community in general will never heal for some people. And that's a fact of life. It will never go away.
It's baffled me, to be honest. Most murders are very straightforward, and you know who's done what to whom and why they've done it. But this one, it still remains a bit of a mystery on why William Keane murdered Jenny Mevin.
You know, Jenny and I could speak for an hour, if no longer, at night. Nigh on every night God sent. I miss her a lot more than people realise.
When she'd phone, it was the same time every day. And it was me that would pick up the phone. And just hearing her voice in the morning was always kind of... It was really nice to always hear her voice. It was almost like a daily routine. It's been weird. I still think about her every day. Not a day goes by when I don't.
She was a good lad.
In the time since his mother's death, David has done his best to move on.
David's very seldom actually said anything about it. That's how private he is. I think it's made him a wee bit harder. He's got a good enough sense of humour, but he's more guarded now. There's no way, I don't think he would ever trust anybody again the way he did with Willie Keane. It makes you question your own friendships, you know. Just leaves you pretty down for a long time. But Jenny would be angry if she knew I was sitting crying. But
it was a frenzied, vicious attack on an innocent, defenceless old lady by someone who she trusted and treated like family. No warnings and no clear motive. It begs the question, who can you really trust?
Distracted by the finer things in life. He looks shattered and he's broke. And all you have to do is find that guy who's perfect for you. And the fine line between wrong and right.
From the outside looking in, other people's lives can look perfect. In 2019, the murder of a teenager tore a community apart.
And I just ran out of work, jumped in the car. I thought in my head, she's cut herself. I thought she must have cut herself and there's blood. All I could think was, but why is she home?
I was really struggling to believe that he did it, and that if he did do it, he didn't mean to do it, it was an accident.
Life is fragile, and it only takes one person and a betrayal of trust to shatter everyone's world. It's like they say, you never know what goes on behind closed doors. Gould and her family lived in the Wiltshire town of Cairn, nestled in the North Wessex Downs, an area of outstanding natural beauty.
We've lived here over 20 years. It's a very small community, very close community. When you have children and they go through the school system and take part in activities such as swimming lessons or football clubs or brownies, scouts, that sort of thing, you get to know a lot of people.
It seemed like the ideal place to bring up children, and the Goulds were lucky enough to have family nearby.
We're close, we see a lot of each other. She was very close to her cousins. They're all of the similar age. So they've all gone through the same milestones together. And when we see them now, there's one man down, she's missing.
Ellie was born on the 6th of February 2002, and I was born 4 weeks later on the 6th of March. So being that exact month apart, inevitably we were very close because we were so close in age, and also kind of the two only girls, like within the cousins. And we also just got on really well.
They were like sisters. It was almost like we had twins in the family. And from day one, they were as thick as thieves. Even before they could start crawling, you'd put them in their car seats together and they'd sit there and they'd be talking in baby language, totally gabbling away in baby language with each other.
As she grew up, Ellie had a passion for horse riding.
She liked me driving her up to the stables and watching her jump and put the jumps up for her and move them around.
There we go, see? Oh, God, look how confident she is.
We were very close, and I'm so glad we spent those years together. We both had a love for horses, so that was our life. That's what we did at the weekends. And as a result of that, we had a lovely relationship.
When Ellie started in the sixth form at Harden Newish School in Chippenham, she quickly made a new set of friends.
We had all come from different groups, and it was just the first day of school, and I remember just saying, oh, let's go and sit with Ellie and Tilda. And so we went and we sat with them, and we've just been sat together ever since and became really close friends quite quickly. As our school year progressed, we did begin making friends with more people, so more boys joined our group. We'd spend every minute that we could together, and we just really bonded over the silliest things.
They were a lovely group of girls and boys, and we got to know them, and, you know, I used to have a chat with them and hear about all the shenanigans that went on at school. It was good to be part of their lives, really.
It's a normal part of a developmental stage for teenagers to turn to their peers and identify more powerfully with them and form very strong bonds with their friendship group, because, you know, that's how they compare, contrast, fit in, feel approved of, all of that kind of stuff. So the power of friendship at this age is very important.
Ellie was so funny, so bubbly and so smiley. The one thing that stands out to me for her, which I really, really got on with her well with, was that she was so real with everyone. She didn't change in front of people. She was always just Ellie, which was just amazing to me.
Ellie was a normal, happy, carefree teenager, living life to the full. In January 2019, she had some news that, as a mum, you know is inevitable, but it's also something you worry about.
She told me one day after school that a boy had asked her out, and she seemed flattered. You know, she was quite bubbly. I said, this boy's asked me out, Mum. And I said, oh, that's nice. What's he called? And obviously asked a few questions about him. And I felt reassured that he was known to them. He was from Derry Hill. He knew the sons of good friends of ours. So I just thought, that's probably a good choice.
The boy in question, Tom Griffiths, was a bright, talented sportsman and had been at school with Ellie and her friends for years.
She'd fancied him for quite a while, actually, before we joined Sikh form. Him and her had a weird sort of on and off thing in lower school, sort of around year 10 and year 11. And then when we finally joined Sikh form, it turned into a relationship. It was only Tom and Ellie that they were the only romantic relationship in our group.
Some of the boys played for Chippenham Rugby Club, and he was in that team, so that's how the connection was made. And he seemed a quiet lad, nothing remarkable about him. We were a bit surprised But as Matt and I said, it's the first boyfriend, it'll fizzle out.
It seemed her mum was right. It wasn't long before priorities shifted for Ellie, and boyfriend Tom became a less important part of her life.
So as Mox approached, I think she sort of realised she didn't need or want a boyfriend. She decided that actually friends and education was more important to her than having that one single person in her life. So she sort of decided to focus more on revision and, you know, mingling with the girls a bit more.
The thing is about teenage love, it could be your first important relationship. Your self-worth, your identity, how you see yourself are all tied up in somebody fancying you or wanting to go out with you. Now imagine the opposite when they say, I don't want this anymore. All that stuff can feel like the rug has literally been pulled from under your feet.
Her friends have told me that she finished with him on that Thursday night, and she posted something to them that how relieved she was that she felt freedom again.
Ellie had called a halt to her relationship with Tom. The next day, the 3rd of May 2019, would be her last.
On the Friday morning, it was just a normal morning. She was eating cereal. I was about to go to work. She would normally have gone into school on the Friday morning, but she didn't have any lessons. So she decided to stay at home and revise. And her friend Ellie Welling was coming at about 12 o'clock to collect her, to drive her into school, because they both had history together. So that was the plan.
There are many things you fear as a parent, but the news Ellie's mum Carol received from husband Matt on that Friday afternoon was her worst nightmare.
He rang me at work, absolutely hysterical, and just said, Carol, you need to come home, you need to come home. Ellie's had an accident, she's had an accident, just drive carefully, Ellie's had an accident. Oh, and I was so taken back because I've never heard him be so hysterical.
On the 3rd of May 2019, Matthew, father of 17-year-old Ellie Gould, had called 999 after returning home.
999, which service do you require?
He also rang his wife Carol, saying there had been an accident in the house.
And I just ran out of work, jumped in the car. I thought in my head, she's cut herself. I know Matt didn't like blood. I thought she must have cut herself and there's blood. But all I could think was, but why is she home? Why is she home? She shouldn't be home till about 4 o'clock. Why is she home? And all sorts of thoughts are racing through my head as I drove home. As I was coming through a car, in a police car, the sirens was trying to get past and everyone was pulling over.
Carol had no idea what her husband had discovered. Detective Superintendent Jim Taylor was the senior investigating officer on the case.
Matthew returned home at around about 3 o'clock and walked into the kitchen to find Ellie. Of course, his initial impression and thoughts were that she must have been injured or she must have been involved in some sort of accident, and immediately sought help from a neighbour. And they called the ambulance, and of course, ambulance will automatically call the police. Officers arrived and uniformed colleagues arrived, and they were the ones who initially attempted first aid. They were faced with a horrific scene. Eleanor was found face down, and there was a large amount of blood. But noticeably at the time, she was lying face down with her right arm across her body, holding on to the handle of the knife, in such a way to make it look as though Ellie had inflicted the wounds herself.
And as I pulled around the corner here, there were just police cars everywhere, just abandoned. And I had nowhere to park, so I abandoned mine as well and just ran up to the end of our drive. And Matt was just there sobbing. And I just said, Matt, what's happened? What's happened? And that's when he said, Ellie's died. Ellie's died. And you can't believe the words that are being said. How could what? She's died? How? And there was an ambulance in the drive. And I can remember thinking, no, the paramedics are here. They can do something. They can do something. And we all just stood there stunned.
We know that she was probably there for about 4 hours. The nature of the injuries was such that even a skilled surgeon would struggle to have saved her life. So normal first aid, with officers at the scene, I don't think would have been able to save her life, sadly.
Your mind goes blank anyway, you're in such shock. So we were sat in the back of a police car, and they very quickly started to ask us who her friends were and what her plans were for that day. And I just remember my mind going blank. I couldn't remember her friends' names. I couldn't remember their surnames. The information I was given to the police was so sketchy. I can't believe they managed to piece things together, really.
When you hear about the nature of the injuries, the amount of blood, and you understand the family circumstances, Ellie came from a very loving family, very popular at school, no indications to suggest that she would she would take her own life. And then you automatically start hypothesising that obviously this is likely to be a homicide until such time that you can disprove either way.
Unaware of the police's suspicions, Ellie's distraught parents believed their daughter's tragic death was a mishap.
Matt was in so much shock he couldn't speak. We were going through it in our heads. I was convinced she just had an accident and she must have climbed up on something for some reason to get maybe something out of a cupboard and had fallen off a chair and hit her head. I kept saying she must have had an accident. Maybe she put the knife in the toaster and electrocuted herself and fell backwards. All these things were going through our head. And then at one point Matt said, "No, Carol, no. There was just too much blood. Too much blood." And then you just can't imagine what had happened at all.
While Ellie's parents were struggling to come to terms with her death, the police were starting to become suspicious.
It was quite evident early on that a neighbour had seen someone call at the address earlier in the day. And whilst they didn't see their face, we had a description that they were male, they were slim-build.
As police started the hunt for the mystery visitor, Ellie's parents had been taken to the local police station.
The police that were looking after us came in and said, "We have an update. We're investigating a murder inquiry." And at that point, I felt like I'd been thrown against a wall and thought, a murder? Murder inquiry? Ellie was just loved by so many people. She didn't have any enemies. Who on earth would murder our dear Ellie? Who would do that?
It's shocking enough to come to terms with the loss of somebody you love. But then that is made far more powerfully painful when you realise it's a murder. What happens then to the family and the friends? Suspicion. Everything that you thought was safe is no longer true. The way you think about yourself and the world is shattered. And psychologically, that is traumatic.
It's impossible to understand how all of a sudden your home can become a crime scene. And not only that, but while you're struggling to deal with what's happening, you're having to take calls you never in a million years thought you'd have to take.
I get a call from our son Ben, who lives in Oxford, and he had seen on Facebook that somebody had posted, "There's something going on, police cars everywhere," and a picture of the end of our drive. And he said, "Mum, what's going on? What's going on?" And I had to tell him that Elliot had a terrible accident and she died. It was awful. And it was just a whirlwind. I look back now and it was just terrible, terrible.
My mum's phone was ringing and the caller ID said that it was Carol. And my mum went out into the hall to pick up her phone. And I could tell quite quickly from what I could overhear that something was really wrong. I can just remember my mum saying, I'm so sorry, Carol, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say, but I'll go and tell Mum and Dad. And then my mum got off the phone and just said, Matt's come home from work and he's found Ellie dead. Sorry. Just grab a drink. Thank you.
At first, not that much was put out by the police, but once it was revealed that a 17-year-old girl had been killed in her own home, I think everybody that any of myself and my colleagues spoke to, there was this feeling of shock. What is going on? This can't be happening in our road, in our town.
When someone is killed within their home, it's very likely that they are known to the offender. Thomas Griffiths, we know, had been in a relationship with Ellie.
DS Jim Taylor and his team immediately contacted Ellie's friends to get as much information on Tom and Ellie as possible.
I was at my boyfriend's house and I'd got a call from my dad to say, oh, Ellie, you need to come home now. We've got police officers at the house. And straight away I started to panic and I thought, oh God, what have I done? And I finally got home. They took me into my living room and they just started asking me questions about Ellie. And that day I was supposed to be picking her up to take her into school, but she had messaged me in the morning to say, don't worry about picking me up. So I was just sort of giving them the answers, but not really panicking, just more nervous of being questioned by the police. It wasn't until they said that, Ellie had died that I completely broke down and didn't know what to do with myself.
The detective's questioning soon turned from Ellie to Tom.
I was screenshotting messages that Tom had sent, and then I looked on Snap Maps to see where he was. Just coincidentally, I just thought, I'll just have a look on Snap Maps, and it so happened to be that he was still in the area. I thought, oh gosh, Tom's gone over to convince her that they should be together. And Ellie, being Ellie, has been very blunt with him and gone, look, Tom, it's not happening. We're not going to get back together. You need to get over it.
We see our friendship groups as our circle of trust. We've shared stuff, we are vulnerable with each other. All that sort of stuff is what bonds groups of friends together, particularly teenagers. To then pierce that with, well, there might be an enemy within, is very destabilising.
For the police, Ellie's ex-boyfriend, Tom Griffiths, wasn't just a person of interest. He was the person of interest.
We knew that we had to find him very quickly and get an account of his movements for that day. When officers eventually caught up with him, he was displaying some injuries to his neck, which looked fresh. His demeanour at the time, I think they were concerned about the consistency in what he was saying. And there was some information from a neighbour whom they'd seen call at the address of the Goulds, and he matched the description of that person. And therefore, at the time, he was deemed a suspect and was arrested.
So Tom wasn't acting normally, but then he was a teenager who'd found out the ex-girlfriend he still loved was dead. It didn't necessarily mean he was guilty of murder.
There was an update to say a young man had been arrested. And it was at that point that Matt and I looked at each other and said, it's Griffiths, isn't it? It's Griffiths. And we looked at the police officer and said, it's the boyfriend, isn't it? It's the boyfriend. And he just looked at us and he said, I'm really sorry, but we can't confirm anything at this stage. But let's just say I think you've worked it out for yourself. And the shock, honestly, the shock, we just could not believe it. Just couldn't believe it.
Already reeling from the death of their 17-year-old daughter Ellie, Carol and Matthew Gould were at the police station when they were told that her ex-boyfriend had been arrested.
I remember saying to the family liaison guy, please don't tell me you're bringing him here. Please don't tell me you're bringing him here to Millshire where we are. And he went, no, they wouldn't do that. But they did. So we were sat in the family suite and that monster Griffiths was in the cell.
Still unaware Tom was in custody, Ellie's friends revealed to police that he'd messaged everyone on the day of the murder.
He sent us all pictures in a sort of a group chat. He sort of sent a picture of him and you can see sort of scratches on his neck. And it was him saying, you know, I've been self-harming, I've been having a really tough time. And obviously everyone was saying, Tom, look, you can always talk to us. You know, we're here for you. We're your friendship group. This is what we're for. If you ever feel like that, just let us know.
Soon, though, news of the arrest got out.
As the days went on and it was revealed that another teenager, 17-year-old boy, had been arrested in connection, the sense of disbelief just grew, really.
See, I really struggle with it because I knew Tom since primary school. So my relationship with him, from my point of view, was really good. I really liked him as a friend. So for me, I was really struggling to believe that he did it and that if he did do it, he didn't mean to do it, it was an accident.
Now a murder suspect, Tom Griffiths was interviewed at Millshire Police Station.
He immediately asked, he's been at home studying all day, is his girlfriend okay? And that was one of the first things he'd said. And he hadn't heard from her. He said that in the morning he was going to school and his mum took him to school. He says that he wasn't feeling very well, so he didn't want to go to school, and once she dropped him off, he got the bus home. He didn't realise that his mum came back a little bit earlier as well, so she came home around about 10:45. The first concern that we had at the time was that Tom said that when his mum came home, she wasn't aware that he was at home because he hid in the wardrobe away from her.
Just 2 days after Ellie's horrific death, Carol and husband Matthew had to do something no parent can ever imagine having to do: identify their daughter's body.
On the Sunday, we were picked up and driven to the mortuary to see Ellie. They told us that they had to put plasters over her neck so that we couldn't see the stab wounds, all 13 of them. But she looked at peace. We put a rose on her. Rose is her middle name. And it was heartbreaking. As I said before, no mother should ever hold the cold hand of their murdered child. That is wrong. That is disgusting. That is horrific. And yeah, it was awful.
As more horrific details about Ellie's death emerged, the ripples of shock spread beyond the family.
As a reporter, I'm working in a newsroom where a lot of the stories we do are happy community stories. When you get a big story like this, which is very much affecting the community, it does have that sort of sobering effect. You do become hardened a little bit to hearing about things, but this kind of affected all of us.
In the police cell, Tom was still insisting he knew nothing about Ellie's death and was explaining his movements on the day she died.
The next part of his account is that he speaks to his neighbours and that he's upset and stressed out about exams and a family member who's suffering from ill health, and that he was self-harming. And his neighbours obviously remember seeing some scratch marks down his neck because they commented on it.
A clearly upset Tom then asked the neighbour for a lift back to school.
He again became very upset and asked to speak to the school nurse and explained that he was self-harming. They then called his mother. She came to pick him up from school and took him back home.
A few days later, Jim, the detective, came to see us. We were at my parents' house in Wiltshire by then, and they had to tell us how Ellie died. And I remember saying to Jim, would it have been quick? Would it have been quick? And he did look in my eyes and he said, we think she was unconscious after you strangled her because she had no puncture wounds to her hands, which you would naturally use to defend yourself if somebody was coming at you with a knife.
The evidence police were gathering was beginning to cast doubt on Thomas Griffith's version of events, so detectives began to intensify their questioning, as well as analyse his digital footprint.
So when we downloaded Thomas's smartphone, we could see that around about 10:50, his smartphone disconnected from the family router and didn't reconnect for some 1 hour later. His location services were activated on his phone, and we were able to identify that at 10:53 he arrived at Eleanor's house. And from that information, we knew that he left at 11:51. So he'd spent almost exactly an hour at the premises.
The police didn't have enough to charge Griffiths in connection with Ellie's death. But more evidence showing he wasn't where he said he was coming to light.
We were also fortunate enough to get some CCTV from a bus company who had dash cam footage of a silver Ford Fiesta. We were able to see clearly that it was Thomas Griffith's car. So there was a digital footprint of his movements. It showed that automatically his account was wrong. We ascertained that whilst he returned home and after about an hour, there was an 18-minute gap where he dropped off the router again at home and then logged back on. It would indicate a short exit from the premises. Within an exactly 9-minute walk away from his home address, the search teams located a black bin liner which contained blood-stained tea cloths, blood-stained napkins and towels.
The evidence was sent for forensic examination. But it was still far from clear what Tom's motive for harming Ellie could have been.
I wonder whether there was a sense of loss of face in the friendship groups with his family, her family, the community, and all that kind of image would have been shattered by being dumped in his mind. And at this point, a 17-year-old, this might be his everything. This is how I see myself. And I need to restore my pride, my sense of self, how hurt I feel. I don't like how you've made me feel, and you are going to pay for it.
So I think it was early hours of Monday morning, when we received the news from the laboratory that the blood on the trainers at Thomas's home address was Eleanor's. And really that was the evidential breakthrough that we had, and we needed because at no stage during his questioning did he ever say that he'd come into contact with Eleanor when she'd been bleeding, and there's absolutely no way that those shoes will have her blood on them because he only ever wore them for work.
Armed with damning forensic evidence, police charged 17-year-old Thomas Griffiths with Ellie Gould's murder. Although the family knew the appalling details of how Ellie had been killed, it wasn't public knowledge.
So you'd hear people say, oh, it must have been an accident, it must have been push and a shove and a hit of the head. And you just wanted to scream and shout and say, no, it wasn't, no, it wasn't. But we couldn't say anything. And there was no way we were going to let anything leak and jeopardise anything to do with the trial.
How can someone that you spend every day with betray you in that way and destroy so many lives, really? It's just, yeah, I'm full of disbelief still.
Three days after Ellie Gould had been found stabbed to death in a frenzied attack, her ex-boyfriend Tom Griffiths was charged with her murder. But it was inexplicable why a seemingly normal 17-year-old boy would do this.
And at that stage, we're preparing for a not guilty trial. So all the evidence that we have to assume that he's not going to plead guilty. He's going to continue with his course of action that he's not involved. And the onus is on the prosecution to prove the case.
Police worked hard to ensure the evidence proving Griffiths had killed Ellie was watertight and showed that he had planned it.
There just wasn't enough evidence to suggest that by parking his car in the road, he meant to kill Ellie. By putting his hood up, he meant to kill Ellie. It just wasn't enough. The prosecutor, the Crown Prosecution Service, the investigation team felt that whilst it was a good indicator, there just wasn't enough to get us to that point, sadly. But based on the crime scene examination, we strongly suspect that Thomas had stabbed Ellie. He'd then cleaned his shoes at the scene. And the likelihood was that he'd cleaned the knife and then wiped it on the apron in efforts, I suspect, to remove his DNA.
Throughout the investigation, the lengths Griffiths had gone to trying to cover his tracks had disturbed police. But there was one act that stood out.
Around about 11:45, a message was sent from Eleanor's phone to her friend, who was due to pick her up in a little while to take her to school. And we strongly suspect that Tom sent that message.
I don't believe he knew the code. We believe when Ellie was dead, he used her fingerprint to open up her phone to send a message to Ellie Welling to stop her coming here. But the most chilling thing he did was he put the knife in Ellie's hand and raised her arm to her neck and reinserted the knife into a wound in her neck to try and make it look like she had killed herself. That is one hell of a monster. That is an evil psychopath. And then he calmly walked out of here as if nothing had happened and continued to try and pervert the course of justice and hide the evidence.
On the 29th of May, nearly 4 weeks after her murder, the town of Cairn came to a standstill for Ellie's funeral.
It wasn't until I think we were walking into the church behind the coffin that was a massive point, I think, where everything kind of hit me. And it was just, I think, the most difficult kind of day out of everything that we've been through.
It was surreal. The numbness gets you through. Many people have said to me it's the most saddest thing they've ever been to. There was silence in the church, apart from hearing people cry, just sobbing. It was just heartbreaking.
The Goulds still didn't know why Ellie had been killed. In August, during his hearing, Griffiths pleaded guilty to Ellie's murder. But he gave a new version of events of the day she died.
In his defence case statement, Thomas said that he drove the car to Ellie's house and they were there with the intention of studying, and they studied for a while. They then started to argue about family members, and it's at that point Tom says that he suffered from a degree of amnesia. He remembers strangling Ellie, and then he loses his memory, and he came to with Ellie having been stabbed. It seemed to me a minor argument, a minor disagreement that escalated exceptionally quickly, and I find that really hard to believe.
Blind rage can lead you to forget. The logical brain gets pushed out of the way while the adrenaline has to have a way out, which is usually in violence. However, the fact that after that he put her hand on the knife, he used her fingerprint to send messages, is something quite different. This is not amnesia, this is cold, calculated planning.
Whether his story was believable or not, Thomas Griffiths pleaded guilty to Ellie's murder, meaning the case would not go to trial. It wasn't until sentencing in November 2019 at Bristol Crown Court that Carol finally came face to face with the boy who had gone from boyfriend to killer.
He's a coward. He just looked down. He wouldn't look up at any of us. I stared at him the whole time. I wanted him to see my face. I also stared at his parents. His dad just looked upwards. He wouldn't look at anybody. And his mum just looked down.
He was sentenced on the basis that he was a child, even though he was within weeks away of being an adult. The offence committed, he was a child, and he had no previous convictions, and he was sentenced to life, of course, mandatory, but with a tariff of 12.5 years.
Ellie's family and friends were devastated.
The judge read out how long he would get, and there was just this feeling of disbelief, like how could such a disgusting crime get such a lenient sentence? We thought, what more must he have done to our poor Ellie to get more? And I just remember, like, one of the most painful memories that I have is exiting out of the public gallery and hearing the noise that Carol made. It was just gut-wrenching, really. It was just this wail of pain that everybody was feeling, but no one could put across how painful it is to hear that that is all her life was worth. It wasn't even how long she was on this earth for.
He got the minimum sentence for basically apologising for what he had done, which he didn't even read out his own apology. He got his lawyer to read it out, which is just pathetic, you know. Anyone can sit down and write "I'm sorry" on a bit of paper and not actually feel sorry for what they've done.
As a police officer, I felt the sentence was appropriate and within the sentencing guidelines. As a father, I was devastated for the family.
Carol immediately tried to appeal the sentence, but despite a wave of support, the appeal was turned down.
The only positive thing our barrister said about it all, and I cling on to this, was that when he comes up for parole, they will look back at the crime, and he went from 0 to 100 in terms of violence for no reason, which makes him such a dangerous individual.
Ellie's friends and family rallied round to ensure that out of the darkness of the murder, they could continue to shine a light on Ellie.
Our long-term goal is to have self-defence lessons become a mandatory part of the national curriculum. We want pupils to have this skill so that they can grow up and hopefully never use it, but should they have to, they can protect themselves.
There we go, see? Oh, God, look how cute she is.
We were given these books of condolences. One was left at the school and one was left at the church. A lot of the school pupils have written some lovely things in here, and we realise now what Ellie meant to so many different people. There was one that particularly stood out to me, and I don't know this person, and they've just signed their name with crosses. I didn't know you that well, but I remember you always smiling to everyone you passed in the hallways, me included. Your smile made my day. Ellie, I wish I could tell you in person how much I appreciate your smile. And I just thought, yeah, well, that was Ellie.